Welcome to the RPGBOT.Podcast. I'm Randall James, your chaotic evil podcast MC. With me is Tyler Kamstra.
Hi, everybody.
And Random Pal.
Howdy.
And tonight we have a special guest with us, Dr. Terry Macmullan.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. It's great to have you here. Tyler, what are we going to do today?
Well, today we're going to talk about some philosophical stuff. We are going to talk about playing to your character's alignment. So alignment is a system that loosely defines your character's philosophical outlook and has existed in Dungeons & Dragons since the earliest editions. And over time, it has remained kind of this vague, frustrating part of the game that is sometimes very useful, sometimes not useful at all. And in a lot of cases, people have just decided to discard it entirely because it's so frustrating. So today we're going to try and talk about how to make alignment useful, how to make it meaningful for your character, and how to actually play to the alignment that's written on your character sheet.
I'm going to speak to the elephant or perhaps the professor in the room. Terry here is a name you may have heard if you listen to other D&D podcasts. He was on Dragon Talk recently. He is someone I actually know in real life. If you did listen to that episode, you heard a decent chunk where he talked about the Satori Summer Camp and running a class using a framework of D&D 5th edition to basically run through questions of morality. I was one of the people who helped him run that. I ran a table of 4, and I have been part of that camp for a very long time. And that's how we met. And let me tell you, it was a really surreal experience to hear from my podcast crew. Hey, do you know this guy, Terry Macmullan? Yes. How do you know this person? So it's great to have you, Terry. Thank you.
It is really wonderful to be on this show. I've been using your materials online since I got back into Dungeons & Dragons with 5th edition. So it is a huge honor to be here. And Random, it was such a fun experience in the BP days, the before pandemic days, when we could do that. And I'm looking forward to doing it again, hopefully this summer. I literally just, 2 hours ago, finished my first in-person game of D&D at my local comic book store. 2.5 years, something sadly long like that. So hopefully we're moving back towards the good times, towards the normal times. That time at Satori really was a surreal and wonderful experience. It absolutely sold me on the really powerful educational philosophical power, latent power and potential in using D&D, if that's something everybody at the table wants to do. And so I look forward to talking to you about that. And also what was said, kind of the inherent muddiness and the inelegance sometimes of alignment. So happy to get into it and talk to all of you about this. Thanks again.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into it because, like you said, it's a wonderful tool for exploring your own thoughts and getting to explore, let's say, an alignment that doesn't match your own alignment. And yet I feel like so often at tables that I've been at, we do just completely wave off alignment. Maybe somebody at session 0 or the first session will call out like, I'm, lawful neutral. And then immediately the first thing they were doing is robbing a bank. And it's like, how did you come with us? How did we get here? What are we even doing?
Yeah, I have a neutral good gnome cleric whose response to everything is like, just murder them, just kill. And it's like, are you sure you want to? And I'm not trying to say like you're playing your alignment, Larag. I just constantly say like, do you maybe want to look at chaotic evil or neutral? Because I really feel like that's it. It's like, no, I'm good. Let's kill them all. So it's the inelegance is there sometimes, but maybe that's some of the fun of the game.
Yeah, I feel like what we really need is like a rubric just to hold up. It's like, here's some outcomes I anticipated based on the situation I just gave you.
We can do it. I'm a professor. I can do rubrics all day. I can throw down the rubrics. We can do it.
You talked about some of the history of like how in 5th edition, the 3x3 grid that you have seen many memes made of as a summary isn't quite the right word. As a very simplistic tool, I understand where they got to this. You have lawful, neutral, and chaotic on one axis, good, neutral, and evil on the other axis. This gets you your 3x3 grid. Is that always the way it was?
No, it was not. Back in first edition, when alignment was first introduced, it was just the law chaos axis. Early days of the game, it was very much forces of order. So civilization, humans living in castles versus forces of chaos, goblins and orcs living in caves. So it was very much civilization versus non-civilization. And the idea of being good and evil didn't really enter into it. I can't speak for Gygax because I am not him and I haven't had a chance to talk to him. He's sadly passed. The idea of good and evil didn't enter the alignment access until later in the game's history. May have been 2nd edition. I'm pretty certain that it was. It was definitely in 3rd edition. We got that classic 3x3 grid in, again, I'm pretty sure it was 2nd edition. And then it stayed that way through 3rd. Pathfinder 1st edition maintained it. 4th edition is where it changed again. And they removed 4 of the 9 possible combinations. So it was a 5-point axis from lawful good on one end to chaotic evil on the other end, which never made any sense. Like, why can't I be chaotic good anymore? Who knows? 5th edition, of course, brought us back to that classic 3x3 grid. Law, chaos, good, evil, and all things fit into those 9 neat little boxes. So one of the things I wanted to hit on before we go too far, the good and evil, law and chaos, a popular thing in D&D is to say no one believes that they're the villain. A good way to create a sympathetic villain is for the sympathetic villain to believe that they are doing the right thing or they're doing what they're doing for a good reason. A lot of people look at alignment and say, like, my villain is very clearly doing something very wrong, but they're doing it for very good, justifiable reasons, potentially. It's very difficult to fit them into this good, evil, law, chaos axis system. Part of the reason I think people struggle with that is good and evil and law and chaos are really bad terms to describe exactly what they're trying to capture. So something that I suggest to people who are struggling with this, for law chaos, use dogmatic and pragmatic. Dogmatic meaning I have a strict philosophical code by which I live. Pragmatic meaning like I'm kind of figuring this out as I go. And then for good and evil, selfish, selfless. Selfish meaning I am self-interested. I am focused on the things that benefit me. And selfless meaning I am focused on things that benefit people other than me. Like, you could look at your villain doing all of these evil things, and it is entirely possible that they are pragmatic and selfless, which would fit into essentially chaotic good, even though they're doing something horrendously evil.
Yeah, I think to flip it, first of all, this is the first time I'm hearing this, and I think this is brilliant. I think this really does a great job of capturing what we should be capturing when we talk about this. Like, classic villain is a villain seeking revenge, right? You know, there's this kingdom, there's a leadership in the kingdom. The kingdom did the small village that the villain is from some wrong. And so they will dogmatically be fixed on doing any harm to the kingdom that they can whatsoever, even if the harm that they're doing is maybe poisoning crops or, attacking innocent bystanders, this sort of thing. It's easy for you to look at it and say evil. It's easy for that villain to look at it and say, well, you're all evil because you support this kingdom or you're members of this kingdom. In reality, they are dogmatically opposed to the kingdom and all of its inhabitants. So yeah, I think this is really great.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of that is just perspective. One person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist, and a lot of times it just comes down to which side of the fight you're on. We'll get into this later on, like, are there things that are objectively good and evil? But the biggest problem that I think people have with alignment is just how to assess someone's alignment. And just that simple change in terminology can really, I don't want to say simplify things, but it can make it much easier to use.
Because I think this is a really great idea, especially the problematic part of making sense of alignment, especially that of a villain, has to do with the player looking at the character piece. And when you say the villain does not see themselves as a villain, I think that's the heart of it. Socrates points out no one ever thinks that what they are consciously, willfully doing is evil. They might recognize that it's against the law. They might recognize the fact that other people don't find it popular or right. But by definition, if a conscious person is doing something, they must think that in some shape, way, or form, it's the right thing to do. I think that's one of the inherent problems with alignment. One way I try to make sense of this is to say, to truly talk about evil, you have to be looking at it through the fourth wall. You have to say that I'm looking at my character. My character, of course, thinks what they're doing is right, but I'm going to try and make sense of this according to one of these other alternate grids. I love the dogmatic, pragmatic, selfless, selfish one. I tend to think of it in terms of tradition, which fits really nicely with dogmatic for lawful in my case, and then freedom as the emphasis for chaos. The one that I use instead of selfish and selfless is compassion and cruelty. because that's the only way that I can really make sense of truly evil, which is intending to do harm, knowing that it will be needlessly harmful. But I really have to try on the one that you just said about dogma and pragmatism. Of course, the problem, I'm philosophically a pragmatist, so I have a hard time with them, inherently being chaotic. But I think that's wonderful. But this really elicits some of the inherent complexities of the alignment system in Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, I have a test I want to bring to this idea of selfish versus selfless, and we could have picked easier words, but here we are, versus the compassion versus cruelty, the Lich. All right, so what do you have to do as the Lich? I want eternal life, I want stronger magic, and I must sacrifice souls to my phylactery in order to reach my gains. It is cruelty. It isn't needless cruelty because it is serving a purpose. And ultimately, that Lich is deciding, I am more important, my desires are more important than these souls that I feed to my phylactery.
I think that's one of those things that you can call objectively evil.
Well, that was the whole reason I brought it up is that I feel we've had a couple conversations recently on the podcast where we talked about it's like, it just depends on what side you're on, whether you view it as good or evil. And I'm like, there's certain things. No, that's just evil.
Yeah.
Like that's cut and dry. Perhaps it was a person at one point, but a Lich is clearly on the monster side.
You think about they are now a Lich, but what drove them to be a Lich? Very few people are going to say, I want my life's goal to be sacrificing souls forever so that I can keep myself immortal. No, this is a person who probably started with a goal of, I need to keep living so that I can defend my family. I need to get stronger magic so that I can hold off this invading army. And then at some point they slipped. I like both of the alternative titles to grids that you guys have talked about, but if we would just want to add a Z-axis on here, which apparently comes out of the screen unless you're in Blender. Pro-social versus anti-social. You can be a lawful good person that's a hermit living in a cave by yourself. And you can have a very dogmatic, I do my 6 hours of prayer and rituals every day. I am in really good harmony with my environment, the animals, nature, all that stuff, and not care at all. And so, if someone were to come in and say, oh, wise druid, please help our city. He said, your city can bugger off, man. Like, this is my forest. I love it here. If you want to include that can add a lot of depth, no Z-axis pun intended, to how you want this character to play out, because that's another really important thing for people's personalities. Simultaneously, to go to the other end of that spectrum, if you had someone chaotic, evil, but pro-social, you could very much have someone who's like, yes, I 100% believe that the entire world should be my dictatorship. You can optimize for efficiency at the expense of people. That's very much like another thing that you could take this down. And that would be a much more believable villain than someone who's just mustache twirlingly evil.
Those are my favorite villains, though.
I would say the mustache twirling absolutely helps in the pro-social case, I have to say.
Right.
It's interesting to think about, is being pro-social necessarily roughly correlated with being lawful?
Not necessarily.
Well, hear me out for a second. So when I think of the idea of lawful, I do think on being able to depend on societal norms and potentially even enforcing societal norms. And so within an organization, like I had with what Random was describing for being pro-social and I'm going to take over the world, I have the thought of like, the equivalent of like, a thieves guild or a mafia within my fantasy world. But you would argue those organizations are strictly lawful. There's a hierarchy. There's levels within the system.
But are they? Because as an organization, there could certainly be those hallmarks of things that you might expect to be lawful, but the individuals inside them, consider the amount of backstabbing, the amount of plots that you're going to have inside any of those organizations.
Well, sneak attack. Keep going.
Sure. That sort of stuff that you're going to find inside that sort of organization, I would say makes it so that the organization, while it has labels for things that you're talking about, doesn't really conform to what I would think of as lawful.
Oh no, those are just the unwritten rules, right? Like everybody knows you can murder somebody 1 rung above you, 2 rungs above you. You murder somebody 3 rungs above you. Oh boy.
The example of the Thieves Guild or the Assassins Guild or the Mafia, they only have social rules because they're trying to create a tiny little social microcosm inside what is fundamentally a predatory antisocial organization. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get around the rogue's ethical conundrum, which is, this is a truism. Thieves hate being robbed. People who lie hate being lied to. So these groups are predatory in a deep sense, because they say, hey, everybody out there, respect property rights. Everybody out there, don't stab me in the back when I'm going to go get my espresso. When we decide it's time to do crime, then we do crime. And in order to do that effectively as an organization, we have to have a little pretend laws inside our group. So this is why I always say, oh, my chaotic neutral rogue, he follows the Zentarum code so strictly. That doesn't make them lawful neutral. That makes them not want to get whacked. They fundamentally have no respect. And this is what Kant would say. It's not just about following the law. It's respecting the law, having an actual respect, which they utterly lack. What they respect is not getting killed is one point I make. Another one, and this is so great. I teach a philosophy and Star Wars class, and we were just getting to Nietzsche. And I tell them before we get there, I was like, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to ruin all writing for all villains for you an all time. Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm not kidding. 95% of it is a hair's breadth away from plagiarism. And it's true. When you see the Sith, and then I have a fun time. I show them exactly where the writers literally just changed one or two words. And we have Nietzsche saying sacrifice of others. We were talking a minute ago about the importance of, selflessness or selfishness. Nietzsche has this, I want to say great line. I'm a big fan of Nietzsche. I don't follow him, but I think he's a tonic at the right time, where he says the overperson, the overman will sacrifice anyone for his intent, for his mission. And now I was thinking of Nietzsche. I think it was random when you were talking about liches filling their phylactery with all these weak souls. It's a very kind of Nietzsche move. I need to do this, right? For my power. We still have no problem calling him evil. And this is one of the wonderful, and Nietzsche is actually really the first person to talk about this. He said, in the old days, we didn't have good versus evil. In the old days, there was good versus bad. The good were people who just kicked ass. And that's what good meant. Aristeia, he was noble, he was powerful. And whoever had greatness, we called good. The opposite of good was bad, which was like, oh, they're just a mob. They're just an NPC. They're just going to get steamrolled. It's only later that humans invented, they had what's called a revolt of morality, where it became good versus evil. And the evil person is the exact same person who used to be considered good. And so this underlines this idea that our modern notion of good and evil has a notion of community woven into it, which Nietzsche finds really creepy and unhuman and insincere at its base. But I think when we were talking about this idea of social and antisocial, I think that's kind of one of the thickest, most accurate, most consistent ways, anyway, of thinking about what good and evil are.
That's awesome.
so I shut things down.
This is going to get edited, but we all just sat there stunned for a second. Man, oh God.
Yeah. Wow.
Wait, I'm not done taking the note.
We've already hit 3 philosophers. That's amazing.
Sorry.
Okay.
Good. That's a brand new metric.
Yeah. On Dragon Talk, I had the same effect. They all just kind of stared at me after I did the professor thing. So I'm sorry.
That was so cool.
It was good. It was awesome.
Yeah.
You raised several interesting points. So I think we alluded to it, and then you explicitly said it. We're willing to entertain the argument of sometimes who the good person is from the perspective of the person. But there's a collection of things that we can isolate, and we can certainly mostly agree that these things are evil, and that these evil things tend to be anti-community, anti-social, against everything else. And even that, I guess, is a societal pinning, right? That is something that's been impressed upon us, that if something is mostly going against the common thought of society, surely it is a bad thing.
You're right. It is impressed upon society. I would also say it's actually one of the deepest things woven into our nature as human beings. And I'm not making, a spiritual moral statement. We're gregarious beings. If you look at us biologically, That's why we have podcasts and the meerkats don't, is because we cooperated.
Yeah.
And in order to cooperate, here's the basic thing. 95% of the people have to be telling the truth most of the time, because a tiny amount of bad actors can have an incredibly corrosive effect on the only thing we do better than all the other critters, which is plan, cooperate, and move forward as a group. And this is a lot of philosophers like, oh, you just turned this into biology. That's not reality. No, it's like digestion. Well, I mean, I actually find that really encouraging to say, and Plato, Plato's often seen as a super idealistic, it's all about the forms and the ideas. He had this lovely story where he said the gods were giving gifts to all the creatures. And the eagle woke up early and got flight, and the badger got there and got claws, and the fish could swim. And humans, since we sleep more than almost all the other animals, we got there late, and we were the last ones. And we say, oh, no, what do you have left? He says, oh, well, you're last, but here's the good news. You get to have the last two tools that nobody else wanted. Okay, what are they? First one is techne, skill. You will be able to make things that don't exist. And the second one is ethos, which is either custom or laws. And so it's this idea that laws aren't just a bummer, like, oh, I've got to be lawful good. I can't just kill the shop owner. No, being lawful good is actually to everyone's advantage, including yours. Who wants to trade with the liar? Who wants to trade with the backstabber? Be lawful, and people will start to trust you.
So real quick, first off, welcome to the RPGBOT.Meerkat. You say lawful good, and I do want to take a quick step backwards as we talk about in previous editions. The mechanics of alignment were actually far more important. Tyler and I, 3.x natives, in 3.x, your alignment defined your class. Monks had to be some kind of lawful. Paladins had to be lawful good. Bards and barbarians couldn't be lawful. The concept of lawful good required for paladin meant role-playing these classes was a real challenge. And it was to the point where they later came out in Unearthed Arcana with several variant paladins for the different alignments. So you had your liberator, your chaotic good paladin, you had your tyrant, the lawful evil.
Your Myrmidon, lawful neutral Myrmidon. I remember that from Dragon Magazine. Yeah.
Okay, I have to stop though. Would your DM actually enforce this? Would they be like, look, you're not acting correctly.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to strip you of your paladin-ness. Now you're just a fellow with a sword and a shield.
For paladins explicitly, that was written into the paladin class description, that if you broke your oath, if you acted outside of accordance with what your deity believes you should do, you explicitly lost all of the abilities of your class levels, and you had to go find someone to cast an expensive spell on you to get them back. This is a real thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I'm losing the word. What was the word? Martin Luther, 95 Thesis, he paid the money for forgiveness.
Indulgences.
And we called indulgences. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's an indulgence spell. Is that what it is?
It's called atonement, but now that you mention it, yeah, basically.
Yes.
No, an indulgence, technically an indulgence is I'm about to go do something chaotic evil. Let me pay you ahead of time and get one chaotic evil worth of chits. And then I'll stab them and then I'll rip them. Because you could literally buy an indulgence before you did the sin, which was that was the French kiss part of that the Vatican had going.
Right. But here's the deal. I know I'm not going to be able to help myself. But yeah, so stepping back into D&D,
right?
Right. So you could do this thing and you could pay somebody.
They went so far as to make a whole paladin prestige class explicitly to make it easier for you to go break the law and still be a paladin. It was Grey Knight or something like that. And like the first level ability you would get is when someone casts atonement for you to get your paladin stuff back because you went and murdered a bunch of people, it doesn't cost anything anymore. It's free. It was such a mechanically important thing. Now I'm grateful that they tried something different in 4th edition and then stopped trying that different thing in 4th edition, but went back to the grid. But it's really interesting to see, like, there was a time when this stuff really mattered to your character. There was magic that could change your alignment. A helm of opposite alignment was a printed cursed item in the DMG. Stick it on, fail a will save, boom, move you to the opposite side of the 3x3 chart.
Although it'd be fantastic if you really wanted to fix that rogue.
Exactly.
The rogue becomes a magician, but not that they know spells, just that they're doing card tricks, and that's exciting.
Right. In the Book of Exalted Deeds and in the Book of Vile Darkness, there were spells that both affected alignment, but also there was like a spell list for if you are good, I don't care what class you are, if you are good and a spellcaster, you can add these spells to your list. And they would usually have self-sacrificing costs, what a great segue in a moment, and the Vile Darkness, something similar. This used to be a really important thing, and people who've only played in 5th edition, obviously I'm seeing the wonderful consternation on Randall's face here. It really did used to matter that much. It's interesting how much it does get ignored now, because this used to be a huge part of your character. It's interesting to see that we're now letting it go when it's so useful with a little bit of fleshing out and tweaking to determine how this character would actually react in a situation.
I'm really glad that you brought up how things used to be, because one of the questions I wanted to answer while we were doing this live, are there any mechanics, are there any classes where your alignment actually matters in 5e?
Not in 5e. There are a very, very small number of mechanical things which can interact with your character's alignment. I believe the Atonement spell, I'll have to double check. I think the Helm of Opposite Alignment actually did make it into 5th edition. I'll have to double check on that one too.
I've always viewed this as only an RP thing and then an RP thing that we skip.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, they got rid of the girdle of gender changing at the very least. So like we're doing okay.
Yeah. Which shows that WotC is in fact neutral good.
They're making progress. Yeah.
Oh boy, are we going to start down the conversation of can any capitalist business be neutral good? Don't get me started.
Hey, we're doing our best.
I think we need a 2-hour podcast for that one.
Just on that, one of my favorite examples when students imply that implicit in Random's idea maybe is that, good is for suckers, and or to flip it around, if you're making a lot of money, you're probably hurting someone. Wonderful anecdote about the Quakers when they started doing business. They went into bakeries in London in the 1800s. And I mean, just the garbage people would put in the muffins and the bread. And the idea was like, we're going to put sawdust in this. It'll be cheaper. And the Quakers said, you know what? We're going to make a pound cake. And we promise you there is exactly this, we're making, what was it, out of this much butter or something. And the idea of a baker's dozen, because of their very Christian commitment to the good and to fair trading and doing well by others, they blew all the other bakers out of the water. Even though they were more expensive, you knew exactly what you were getting. And so again, I think I'd like to hope that you can absolutely have, a profitable business that's leave it lawful good or neutral good. Chaotic good, maybe not. If you don't believe in the laws, I don't know, that might be tricky.
So what I think I just heard you say is being an honest member of society where folks generally believe you when you speak, that what you speak is the truth, can then lead you to success in business if everybody else is stealing and lying in the same industry.
Again, I wouldn't say it's automatic, but I think it's the long game, right? It's the long game. If you are consistently good, people will want to be your friend, people will want to do business with you, and people will trust you. I find it really sad. It's also like how quickly students will say, violence is natural. We all have to be ready to be. It's part of human nature. And I say, raise your hand. How many of you have used physical violence in the last week, in the last month, in the last year? And what's happening right now, the terrible things that are happening in Ukraine, they're terrible and it's aberrant. This is the first time that the NATO bell might be getting rung in any of our lifetimes, which is sad when it happens. But again, I'm a very optimistic human being, and I'm very pro-human, pro-sentient beings, and I think we're actually more inclined to moral goodness than our cynical world often causes us to think.
Yeah, let's ring one for the octopuses, sentient beings.
Cheers. Yeah, that's been an eye opener in the last couple of years. Wow.
Yeah,
that's good stuff.
Yeah. We talk about octopus brains for a little bit. There's actually like an allegory to modern compute architectures, which is really amazing, but maybe we don't step into that right now. You also brought up evil in the world, and there is evil in the world.
Let's ask kind of a hard question. What is good?
Is that for me?
Actually, okay, no. Okay, here's the deal. Terry, you can't go first. Okay, good. You have to let us go first.
We let the professional come in and do his job.
I would prefer that.
You bring us home. I have children. I work for a company that I think does good in the world, and I'm gonna tie it in a bow and say good is improving the quality of life of the people around you. And good is generally, I feel like an important aspect of good, which has become more and more important, I feel like in the past decade, is having empathy, not just for your neighbors, but for everyone. And then taking actions on that empathy. Like, okay, how would this impact other people? How would this make me feel if I were on the other side of it? And letting that drive maybe how you handle your life. That's my swing at it.
One very important thing is it constructive or destructive? I think that good has to be ultimately constructive. I'm not going to say that that's definitely an end all be all. Making art by itself is not necessarily good in the same way that it's not bad.
We all saw cats. Yeah, we understand.
Woof. But for me, I definitely think that there's also, Terry, you'll have to step in and remind me which thing that I'm talking about here. But the best outcome for the most people is one of the very classic
utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism. Yeah. Utilitarianism is very much a philosophy that I subscribe to. At the point where we have 7+ billion people on the world, there's going to be things that are going to generate feelings for people that are positive, some feelings for people that are negative. And I think that ultimately weighing the needs of the many here are going to be a really important thing. So for me, is it constructive in a way that benefits the most people while causing the least amount of negativity for everyone?
I think I agree with you guys perfectly. Yeah, utilitarianism is a good way to think of it, like maximize happiness, minimize suffering, kind of a fun aside, but people who talk about utilitarianism sometimes talk about utility monsters. And one of the things I really love about Dungeons & Dragons is Dungeons & Dragons has utility monsters. They're called dragons.
I like that.
How are dragons utility monsters?
I guess I'm thinking mostly of evil dragons, and I'm not educated in philosophy, so I'm probably getting this very wrong. But big predatory creature, eats everything it can, collects treasure, frequently terrorizes the people around it for its own selfish benefit, and it's enormous, so it can do that a lot for a very, very long time, disproportionately compared to like a single human.
I think you need to combine one more thing, like not only eats resources and also gathers treasure, but literally eats treasure. So if you view treasure as a key utility.
Yeah.
The philosophers who came up with utilitarianism, the people like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, they didn't have dragons. So even though they were British, they presumed that all moral agents are inherently equal. And this is something that ethicists who talk about vegetarianism or veganism will bring up, which is we as human beings are the dragons in this analogy. We say, well, we're going to cause intentional pain, but my happiness is worth more than their life. They would say, obviously that fails, right? Which is why most people would say that. I think you're right. The dragon is saying my dragon horde is more important than all the dead farmers or whatever. But we kind of look at that and say, well, that's why we call you a monster, because one dragon's happiness doesn't beat all these sad people who've been burned alive and everything.
Yeah, but if I were a dragon, I would totally think that other dragon is justified and these farmers need to stop complaining and perhaps consider tithing a little bit of gold to the dragon.
Yeah, absolutely. which underlines the fact that, yes, the dragon would think that. That's why the dragon is wrong and they're evil, which is why Socrates says all evil is just the product of ignorance.
So you said a phrase a second ago, and I wanted to you named several philosophers. And then you said their claim is that all moral agents are evil.
Equal.
Oh,
yes.
That changes the interpretation of that.
That's Ayn Rand, who says all moral agents are evil.
Wow. I'm glad I clarified, because I was going to have a whole other flavor on the rest of this conversation.
That's Fountainhead. No, all moral agents are equal. Which is why random is right. The greatest good for the greatest number, and do a head count. Literally, I mean, this is why sometimes utilitarians are so boring, but it's really hard to argue with them. Or they say, if I have an outcome that makes 17 people happier and another outcome that makes 12 people happier, what you're monstrous knowing this. to do anything other than what will maximize the greatest good for the greatest number. What other game are we in?
That couldn't possibly fall apart in real life, though, right?
That's where gaming the system comes in, which is why a 20th century philosopher by the name of John Rawls comes up with one of the phrases, and this sounds like a magic item. This actually sounds like a item, the veil of ignorance, which is moral calculators. Before we, like, if we were to say, 4 of us are here Facebook? And one house has to get knocked down for some reason, let's come up with the standards to decide. If we decide that ahead of time, I'm just going to vote for whatever standard doesn't get my house knocked down. You have to construct things through a veil of ignorance where everybody deliberates on the principles, either having or trying to have ignorance about how it would affect them in particular. But you're absolutely right. The utilitarianism, I mean, all moral systems could fall apart. That doesn't mean you shouldn't shoot for them. The chair I'm sitting on is going to break down one day. Still doesn't mean the engineers should have done their best job to make it.
Oh, and actually what I was thinking about, so we had a prior conversation on the Overton window where you might have a majority of people who are very comfortable in their zone and generally aligned with their views on how the world works, because most people do fall into that. Mm-hmm. And the question becomes, are you accepting of the rights of the minority in whatever the minority case is? The argument that you make that all are equal and therefore let's kind of optimize for happiness of the most feels like, especially if it was taken to the wrong extension, would directly lead to the oppression of minorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the conversations that happened in response to utilitarianism, a distinction we make between it's called act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. So the famous one of act utilitarians would say, well, two famous surgeons are dying in a hospital. Let's find anyone in the hospital with the same blood type, harvest their organs, killing them, and we save 2 doctors, which is going to go on to save hundreds of lives. That act might pass utilitarianism, but when we realize there's a rule that people can just hack you open and treat you like a bag of organs, then that rule fails. A particular act might be okay to say, oh, let's oppress a minority, but the rule that says let's suppress a minority is going to fail because no one is going to feel happy living in a system where, at the very least, they might be on the bad side of the vote next time.
For a while, used kind of a dumb philosophical measurement. The extremely dumb measurement is if a society was defined by some specific action, would my good aligned D&D party go on a quest to topple that society? It sounds like rule utilitarianism is just a way better explanation of that concept. Thank you for teaching me that.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I think that you fixed everything we said.
I don't think that's the case, but keep going.
So, Terry, what is your definition of good?
I'll give you the quick overview that two you hit upon 2 of the big 3, and then I'll try and give my super muddy take that you'll be able to muss up easily. Randall talked about good as improving the quality of life for those around us and having empathy for all. This is an incredibly old tradition. It falls in a subsection of ethics called virtue ethics. And virtue ethics says goodness, I love this, goodness isn't about the act or the product, it's about the being doing it. One of my favorite philosophers, or late 19th, early 20th century philosopher by the name of Jane Addams. She really radical advocate in favor of children's rights, in favor of the rights of the poor people and the incarcerated, and a really aggressive fighter against war. She has this notion of, I love this, concentric circles of compassion. First, you care for the people you love, which if you can't do that, it's really hard to say you're good. I mean, let's be honest. That should,
it's fair.
That should be easy because you have fellow feeling. You should like that. And once you get that, the pebble that was thrown into the pond, the ring expands, and you care for your neighborhood, and then you care for your country. And the goal, like you said, is I go all the way out and I try and emotionally put my arms around everyone. We call that person. And that was latent very much in the teachings of people like Socrates, like the Buddha, like Jesus Christ, about extend that compassion all the way out to your enemies. So I think that is a really great, really viable understanding of what good is. Random talked about utilitarianism, about this idea, I want a constructive world. That's the subset of ethics that says it's called consequentialism. I act for the sake of an effect. So let's measure the effects. The third one that didn't come up, and nobody likes talking about it, and this is why the person most famous for it says, it's because you know I'm right, is a deontology, which is you know what's right, you know what's good, and you're just hiding it. You're flinching from the blow. So this Prussian philosopher Immanuel Kant says we all have a rational understanding of our duty to each other. And this is the example I give my students. And I put my dad actually in the very, very, very first D&D adventure I ever played, gave me a horrible Kantian fork where there's, you know what you should do, and then there's what you want. And the one I give my students is you're driving on an icy road in December and you're going to go on a vacation to Hawaii and you've been saving up and you're driving through the middle of the night and there you see a car accident. Somebody skidded on the ice, hit a car, you see a bleeding human being. What do? There's shades of I try and do CPR, I get the med kit. The small particulars are different, but the basic answer is always the same. You know what to do. Help them. You have to help them. I never had to tell you. I never had to show you a book. I never had to show you a law. Your reason immediately told you what you had to do. In my horrible case, my poor 10-year-old mind, my dad ran us through a version of The Man in the Iron Mask by Andre Dumas, where at the very end, after 3 days, we're finally about to stop the evil wedding of the false prince, and we stumble into a room filled with gold. And the right thing to do is run up the stairs and stop the evil wedding, but we stop for the gold, which he poisoned, and we all die. So Kant would say morality is doing what you know you must, and that we have a rational understanding, and that basically it's variations of the golden rule. You have to act in a way that you could imagine everyone doing the same if they were forced to do. So those are the big three. And I found in experience that last one bites the hardest, because once you see it, you can never not see it. And it's really uncompromising and it's really hard. And that's the one that is the most what we call moral realism. It's real. Goodness is out there, and your reason is the tool you use to connect to it.
Well, is implicit in that there is a implicit natural understanding of duty.
Yeah.
Versus what we're nurtured towards.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's problems with all three systems, but those are the big three. In terms of my own understanding, I think it is good. I'm a pragmatist, which is most close to Jane Addams, which is, and this is why I really loved at the very beginning, the difference between dogmatism and pragmatism. John Dewey says almost any moral system can become privative and destructive of human flourishing if it's done dogmatically. Almost anything can become painful. And so I really love trying to have villains that you could almost see them as lawful good, and it's only when you get close that you see they're actually lawful evil. And it really is because they're usually dogmatic. They've put the cart before the horse. They've put the law before the well-being of living creatures.
I want to very neatly tie that back into what we do here, which is let's talk about how that plays into a D&D character. Lawful good, one of the four quadrants. I will follow the rules and help all of the people I can while following those rules. Chaotic good, your archetypal Robin Hood. Rob the rich, don't steal from the poor. Lawful evil is...
And don't steal the poor themselves.
Also don't steal the poor themselves, yes. Lawful evil, a really interesting one. That's your using the system to your own benefit. That's sort of your typical I wish I could help you, but something, and that's not someone actively, genuinely wishing they could help you. That's, the dripping with, I've manipulated you into the situation. And then, of course, your
lawyers and politicians.
And then your chaotic evil of I'm just going to do whatever I want, no regard for consequences or who it hurts. That's your one sentence summary of each. But now that we've just had several conversations about what these different axes could mean and about what good actually is, what evil actually is, let's say I do want to pretend I'm still in 3.5 and roll up a lawful good paladin. What does that mean you should actually do? I know that this is too vague a question, but in a situation, say you come across a magic item and, you're like, oh man, I could use this and it could help me, or I could donate it. I could sell this instant fortress and feed, house, and clothe a small country for a year. Are you good if you don't do that?
We had a very real version of this come up in the campaign that Tyler and I are playing in. It's Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. We murder hoboed this hag, but in our defense, she had murder hoboed these dwarves. So spoilers for Rime of the Frostmaiden. Go forward like 2 minutes if you don't want to hear this. We did the murder and we stole this pot, and the pot, I forget what it's called, but basically like you add water to it. And if you add water to it, it creates a rich and nourishing stew that can feed something like 30 or 50 or 100 people every 8 hours or something ridiculous, right? We didn't go full... Yeah, we didn't go full socialism. We didn't bring it and say like, for all, please come and have it for free. We didn't go full like laissez-faire capitalism. You know, we weren't charging $3 if the guy down the street was charging $3.50. We were like, hey, everybody's hungry because the sun hasn't been up in forever and there's no food. Give us a nickel. Like, I want a copper for this. And we raised a little bit of money and we used it to make connections with folks, and everybody in town got fed.
We put an item to use as a public service, and I'm not going to call theirs, our characters used that as a means to an end to do some legitimately good works. Like, we saved half of 10 towns from a dragon burning all of 10 towns down.
Not with soup.
We didn't save the other half, but we saved half.
We did.
Not with soup. That's true. The soup wasn't integral to that part. My point is, we're
terrible people. No, that's no, okay. Legitimately, and this is again towards this, like, we're bad people. Why are we bad people? We're in a situation where if we're too late, all of 10 towns is going to burn down. But if we time it right, we will get to fight the dragon before the city burns down that has our inn and our mummy.
We have a pet mummy.
Yes. The other option was going to like the 7th town and guaranteeing we saved 3 towns. And our logic was, if our inn burns down, I don't care if the rest of 10 towns burns down, because there's no consequences to being jerks.
Kind of, yeah. So like I said, none of our characters are good aligned. But if we were good aligned, we find perhaps an item that we could sell to benefit other people, or we find an item that we could just use to directly benefit other people, like the Cauldron of Plenty. That was the name of the item. So you find some item that you could turn to societal benefit. As a good aligned character of some stripe, are you morally obligated to give up that benefit to yourself in order to help society at large? And how much does the benefit to yourself factor into that? Because like, if you have a +1 sword and that's going to keep you alive so you can go save the town from a dragon, are you still morally obligated to give up that thing to benefit others?
I want to make a meta argument. I think this only matters if your DM or your game master makes it matter.
That's true.
In other words, if you're a good aligned character and you sell the +1 sword and donate the money to like a local soup kitchen or orphanage or whatever it may be, and nothing ever comes of it, then at the meta level, you wasted that opportunity. And for you, the player trying to optimize your fun, it was no fun to play to your alignment because it did you no good. If anything, you're an idiot. You're a rube and you fell for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point, right? This is, after all, a game. I think we can be. It's a very dynamic game that we can learn a lot about ourselves, and this is why I want to start using it more as a teacher. It's wonderful in an explicitly educational setting to learn a lot about your motivations. A philosopher named Peter Singer, living philosopher, Australian philosopher, very infamous, very, very infamous philosopher. He's a radical utilitarian. You're aware, you're conscious, you know there are people suffering. He's very strict. There's no ethical reason to keep more than $55,000 a year in the United States. The number is slightly different in other countries based on standard of living. Every dime you make past that, you are saying, my nicer car, my more pleasant, comfortable life is more important than stopping a child from dying in a part of the world where that money would make a difference. And you're only doing it because you're not watching the kid die. And he actually has a really famous set of examples, the +1 sword or the cauldron of, endless nourishment. For him, it's, you're wearing a really nice suit on your way to getting a job, and there's a kid drowning in a pond next to you. First, there's a stick nearby. Of course, oh, sure, I'll extend the stick. Or there's a rope. Sure, I'll throw the rope. There's no sticks, no rope. You're a good swimmer. Do you jump in or not? Well, sure, of course I do. It'd be monstrous to say my suit's more important than this kid drowning right in front of me. Now I tell you, the money you spent on that suit, if you had given it to a certified World Health Organization, you absolutely just saved another kid from death, just as really as you saved that kid from drowning. That's the kind of like bright line, brutal utilitarianism that makes utilitarianism in that understanding really, really, really tough. So were you good? What's the question? Were you good in keeping that, or were you good in holding on to the sword? Is different, right? Because you could say, I'm going to go slay dragons and save people. So I think you can have a more moral understanding. I think selling the soup and then, or having a donation jar for the soup, that checks out, right? You make yourself a little happier. You feed some people. That works. That's definitely utilitarian. That definitely passes their test.
Yeah. Actually, now that you say it, I think what we did is we actually did put a donation jar out. We weren't charging a copper, but we were saying like, oh yeah, just.
Well, if that qualifies as good, we're going to have to do something else.
We'll come up with it. Yeah. Bring the dragon back to life. I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to brainstorm for a second. How can we, as dungeon masters or game masters, make alignment and playing to alignment more meaningful? So we've talked about meta currency, whatever it is in your game, whether it be inspiration or something else. That is one simple thing that we can do. We can give good when you do things that play to alignment, even if in the moment it feels either icky or it feels like it's maybe moving the party backwards. What else could we do?
We all pause as Randall has gone off script.
I like using alignment a lot. I honestly do. I'm from this first edition days. The fact that you can be an anything alignment paladin feels so totally wrong to me. Still, I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yet, but by all means do it. I'm just saying that's where my barometer is set. Have a clear understanding of what law and good mean, right? At a zero session, and then expect people to play to type. I have a situation. We're doing a super homebrewed, mutated version of Waterdeep / Avernus / 10% of Icewind Dale right now. And I'm basically having Vajra become a megalomaniac, and she is twisting the arm of the paladin to go retrieve Nethery's items for her so that she can become powerful because nobody really respects me and I need to have it and I need to be powerful. And she pointed at him point blank, "You swore an oath to serve me. Do it or you're an oath breaker." And the guy who plays the character is like, "Oh, but I'm a good guy." And so he walked out. He was like, "This sucks. Like she's practically forcing me to do something wrong. And if I do something wrong, I did something wrong. And if I don't do something that my boss tells me to, I broke the law and I'm an oath breaker." And so that actually gave them a really tight, he came up with a very clever way to get out of it, which had to do with, telling the truth and making sure everybody knew what he was doing. But have a clear understanding of what alignment means and expect your players to play to type. The alignment that keeps me awake at night, the alignment that scares me, the true wildcat, is true neutral. And the druids from the old days, the first edition druids, it's the fact that they could be all loving and Bambi and vegan and all that stuff, and then be like, "Oh, if I want to hit level 9, I got to go kill my teacher. I'll be right back." Because it was the idea that once that you got to a certain level, you had to kill a druid of the higher level. And it's like, hey, Hakuna Matata, right? It's the circle of life, that was the alignment that truly was terrifying. That, good and evil, they're on a scale. Lawful and chaos, they're on a scale.
That's a little bit different than the Futurama neutral. It's like, tell my wife I said hello. Like that's okay. So there's something implicit in what we're talking about. You talked about like have the conversation of what the alignment is, and then let's role play to it. Let's stick to it. Is it the right idea to have our players pick their alignment, or is it better to say, let's play for a little bit and let's get a feeling? And what you pointed out, I think, is probably right, that, okay, if you're a paladin, you have this oath, that's probably going to dictate to some extent what your alignment is. But for a lot of other classes, maybe it is acceptable to like, hey, let's get through like 3 sessions and let's pick our heads up and see what we think is actually happening.
Well, and so here's another really interesting thing. Just because it's written on your character sheet doesn't mean it's written in stone. If you start a campaign as one alignment and you realize I am role-playing these decisions and I am changing, then you can just shift that. And if you think about what we are doing is cooperative storytelling, that's character growth. This paladin that I played that I so often talk about started life as a lawful neutral paladin with zero intention of helping people for the sake of helping people. And before we went into Death House, had to turn and look at his traveling companions and say, do I care enough to help these two little orphans here who want me inside their house? And they said yes. And so I said, okay, great. My bond is to my group. They say we're going in, I'll go in. And then by the end of it was doing good kind of for good's sake. That sort of character growth is what we want from story. That's something that humans really enjoy. And getting to act that out, you can absolutely have the mechanical change, go from your lawful neutral to your lawful good. If you realize, let's say that you've been raised in a very straight-laced conservative environment, and then as you get out there, maybe you realize, wait, I can just take this guy's stuff and run, and he can't stop me. Maybe you've been acting in a lawful manner, but your character actually wanted to be chaotic, wanted to explore this stuff. And so maybe you do that, and that can be a really cool piece of character building. And then maybe you decide, okay, well, I've gotten tired of this, and I've gotten tired of the negative consequences. I'm going to go back to being maybe neutral. All of this stuff is just a way to think about the character you're playing. And it should not be that the letters dictate how you play. It should be that how you play influences what that character does over time and how we describe it.
You said a few interesting things in what you said. So one, for instance, you have this evil or chaotic characters who grows tired of the consequences. I think implicit in that is the DM has to build in consequences for those actions. And then two, I think you've maybe still asked the question that I'm asking. Does it make sense to write something down because it's what you think your character is going to be? Or does it make sense to write nothing down, play for a little bit, and then realize kind of where we're at, what's actually happening?
I personally, having played a lot of characters at this point, I find it very helpful to have a place to start. Having a place to start is much easier to say, okay, well, I have some basic concept of this character, but do I want to lean towards neutral good? Do I want to lean towards lawful evil? If you want to start from your lawful evil and say, no, okay, let's shade that up to lawful neutral. Maybe the rest of the group, is leaning enough that I should not be doing things that are inflicting cruelty on others. But I think that it's really important to give you a place to work from rather than just try and muddy your way through and write it down what you're experiencing playing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've had a lot of characters who I brought in session one and said, I'm going to play this alignment. Yeah, like it lasts a session or two. And then I said, I want to take this character a different direction. Like the paladin that I played in Raynham's Rise of the Runelord game, Gilder, he was a capitalist paladin. And let me tell you how hard it is to be a brutal capitalist who is lawful good. Yeah, so, the alignment shifted over time as I figured out the character.
And also as the entire table made fun of the capitalist paladin.
Yes. I love that character. That was so much fun. Yeah, like Random said, your alignment doesn't have to dictate how you play, and alignment can change. Your DM doesn't have to dictate to you your character is now chaotic evil for your actions. Like, there is a point where if you're saying, no, my character is still lawful good, and everyone around you saying no, this is chaotic evil, you might need to discuss it with your party. But if you're intentionally deviating from that philosophical outlook that you stated for your character initially, yeah, just change your alignment. It's a bit of text on the sheet of paper. And in 5th edition, it has essentially no mechanical effect. So changing it doesn't cost anything. In 3.5, the best alignment to be was neutral because there were a bunch of alignment based effects like smite evil and smite good and things like that just didn't affect you if you were true neutral. So min-maxers always be true neutral on 3.5. But 5th edition, it's purely a descriptive marker for your character's beliefs and actions. So yeah, if your character changes, if your actions change your alignment.
So how often should a party discuss their alignment and how they think about the alignment of the actions they're taking?
That is a great session 0 question because
yes, I agree.
Realistically, there's a few things that you need to be considerate of. As a DM, you only have so much bandwidth, particularly if you've been listening to a lot of our episodes and you're trying to incorporate several things. Maybe there's just too much and alignment is not a thing you want to focus on. But maybe, you want to say, all right, we're going to start up this campaign. We're going to start up this little one shot or maybe even just an arc within a campaign. And we're going to say there's going to be some moral quandaries. There's going to be some real examination of motivations. And we're going to actually dig into, like Terry did in a couple times during his class, we're going to play through this, and then we're going to sit here for like half an hour and discuss the moral implications of what you just did. Because that was some murder hoboing, or because, that was legitimate good created in the service of, well, the Epic of Gilgamesh in this case. That could be a really cool way to play. Probably not all the time, but I would absolutely want to incorporate some of that into, maybe let's do this for a few levels and see what that does.
To answer the question, how much should you talk about alignment? I think that really depends on the table. If it's a fun hack and slash game, have at it. Most of the people that I play with, we really do lean into the collective improvisational storytelling. And I think I try to think of alignment as, again, it's right in the word, right? It's like it's a direction. It's not fixed. It's not absolute. And sometimes your direction changes. But I think it's really helpful for everyone to kind of have a sense of how they're going to approach the vulnerable person, how they're going to approach the choice between their own, self-interest and the needs of others and things like that. So I think it's actually a really helpful narrative tool. I have found I talk about it more if I have new players. If we're doing it for a long time, I actually use the tier system. And so at level 5 and level 11, I'll say like, hey, maybe, and I did this, you said neutral good, but maybe you're more chaotic good. And again, my best friend in the world, who really is acting like neutral evil, one shade away from sociopath, but he's like, nope, neutral good. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not going to force you, but I like to revisit it. I like to revisit it at the tier points and kind of tweak it there. But I think it's dialogical. There's an interaction between what the alignment is and how your character plays, and how your character plays will over time affect your alignment. And I think I think this is something Random said a while ago. This is character growth, and this is part of the cool arc of somebody like Heisenberg in Breaking Bad. He was not as evil at the beginning as he was where he wound up. And it has to do with how the campaign went, basically. So not all the time, but I think it's nice to have a beat every now and again to assess, to think about it, and encourage people to maybe reflect if they want to tweak it a little bit.
I really like that bit of advice, discussing it at the tier breaks and also at session 0. So we're going to do an episode on session 0 very soon. And doing kind of a miniature session 0 at every tier break, as the story evolves, as things progress, really makes sense. And honestly, that's a good piece of advice I hadn't heard. And discussing alignment in your first session 0 can really solve a lot of problems. There's kind of a classic joke in the D&D space, the lawful stupid paladin, and then the chaotic random, RANDUMB, random rogue generally. But those problematic characters who play some wacky alignment that causes problems, you have the extremely dogmatic lawful good paladin, which especially in 3.5 where you had to be that character to be a paladin, that can cause a ton of problems for everyone else in the group. One of the things in the paladin note in 3.5, you can't be in a party with an evil character. You can't cooperate with an evil character. And to make sure that you're not accidentally cooperating with evil characters, paladins can cast Detect Evil, which in 5e, it just detects basically outsiders. In 3.5, you detected creatures' alignment. It's you could look around a room and be like, which of you are evil? I'm not allowed to talk to any of you, or I'll lose all my paladin powers. So characters like that, knowing that someone wants to play that character ahead of time, very, very important. And it's also a great time if anyone writes chaotic neutral rogue on their character, give them a good hard look and say, murdering shopkeepers and taking their stuff is not chaotic neutral.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I play a lot of Adventurers League, which is meant to be, mobile and a pickup game. What is it? Through season 9, I think they said, okay, you can be lawful evil, but, and then they had all these things about no PvP and all this stuff. And then I think it was in season 10, they said, you know what? Not even lawful evil. You just no evil characters. And it's for exactly this idea a truly evil person will stab another member of the party in the back. And it's really hard to have players have cooperative fun if one person says, I don't have to cooperate, I'm evil. So yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. Talking about it at the session 0 is critical, but I find it really interesting that as we go on, even in Adventurers League, the official play, they had to just kind of move alignment evil off to the side for exactly these problems.
So what's interesting, like we often talk about the idea of the social fix, like getting together with your friends and saying, okay, look, that isn't acceptable, or we're not going to do things this way. I imagine the problem with a proper pickup game is you don't even have the social fix. Like somebody could come in, be a complete jerk, wreck the party, and like, all right, well, I'm out. I'm going to go to the next game store next time I want to play and not deal with the consequences of my actions.
And that's where we see meta lawful evil. But yeah, I mean, realistically, I will admit, in my misguided youth, I have definitely done some detractive to the party actions as a chaotic neutral rogue. And that's a thing that some people are going to want to explore. As long as in the session 0, you understand we're all here for a good time. There may be some times that we are 3, 4, 5 people. There will be times when we disagree on what the best fun is. Let's just yes and in the moment and then talk about it afterwards. I think that that's really, really important to set in every session 0, because without it, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, that's well said.
All right. Oh, perfect. I think we did it. I think that was a whole conversation on alignment and how to use alignment in your game. We have a question of the week this week. This week, our question of the week comes to us from Roxy Notlaland on Twitter. If a person becomes a vampire and does some wrongdoing, who would not normally be inclined towards that wrongdoing? Are they morally culpable for their actions? Why did we pick this question this week?
It felt
random, real weird.
It felt very timely. Yeah, I got asked this on Twitter literally yesterday, and I did not have an answer. So somebody help me out here.
I, the philosopher, am going to wait. I'm not going to jump in. I promise.
Here's a really interesting thing. Back in the Errata 3.0 stuff, we were talking about monster alignments. Are there some things that are inherently absolute good, absolute evil? So undead, particularly not mindless undead, like a skeleton, I would not call inherently evil. A skeleton is more a force of nature, or necromancy in this case.
Or unnature.
Exactly.
Also a xylophone.
A conscious undead, like a vampire, has the choice to do things that are considered evil versus the choice to do things that are not considered evil. And because I so often bring in random pop culture references, let's look at Joss Whedon's Buffy. You have the character Angel, a vampire who got a soul put back in him, and then his own spinoff because David Boreanaz was too pretty to cancel. The interesting thing there is that, so in this lore, being a vampire means you don't have a soul. And so the soul is the thing around which morality happens. So when he got a soul, suddenly he could feel remorse. And that remorse is what prevented him from eating people and throwing them off buildings and whatnot. If vampires in your world are, your typical Bram Stoker Dracula vampire where they have to consume people and they're maybe so bored with societal norms because they've been around for thousands of years. Oh, wait, that's Strahd. And yeah, Strahd's evil, but could you have a vampire that was good? Absolutely. You absolutely could. If a vampire does wrongdoing, then unless you have written into the lore of your world that they have some reason why that was no longer a choice, yes, absolutely, they are culpable.
All right. So I think in 5e, vampires, when they become a vampire, become evil. That is part of becoming a vampire.
Why?
Because vampires bad.
I didn't want to answer this question.
The D&D vampire. Where was I going with that thought? Vampires bad. So a perfectly good aligned character could become, like in this question, good aligned character becomes a vampire against their will. They become evil. They're now motivated to act in an evil way. And this is one of those kind of cases where alignment is prescriptive rather than descriptive. And I guess that is, that's literally Strahd.
There's two things. There's a bit where the Buddha is talking to his followers, and they say, in Hinduism, they think there's these 6 different realms. And one of them is the realm of the gods, and one of them is the realm of the hungry ghosts. He says, oh, what if you're wrong and you go to the realm of the hungry ghosts? He says, well, if I find myself there, I will talk to these hungry ghosts like I do to you. And I will teach them about the wrongness of attachment. And I will teach them about the wrongness of ignorance. And I will teach them about the wrongness of hatred. And basically he says, I'll preach to them just like I preach to you. Because if they're aware, it's the same. And then he goes all the way around the cycle. And they even gets, what if you're right and you go to the gods? And I love this. He's like, I will preach to them about the wrongness of attachment. And it's like, I don't care if they're gods. They also could improve. They also have problems. I think the Buddha would say, if the Buddha was speaking to a vampire and they're like, I'm so hungry, I need to feed. And we're like, do you? I'm sure you want to. Do you have to? Random gave us Joss Whedon's Buffy. Check out The Addiction, 1995 film with Lily Tomlin, and I'm biased. She's a philosophy graduate student who gets bit. And it starts with like a reference to like heroin and vampirism. She's walking around the streets looking for a victim, and she sees this old guy talking to himself about Kierkegaard. And she goes to feed on him, and he swings around with lightning speed. And it's Christopher Walken, who's a vampire who won't feed.
Interesting.
And he says most vampires are weak. They have bad faith. They're moral cowards. Are we culpable? I answer the question, absolutely. If we have a choice and we do it, we're culpable. Tyler, you're absolutely right. Once you become a vampire, you become evil. That's part of that's maybe not the best writing. That's their orientation, but they shouldn't have to be. If they have a conscious will, they make a choice. To answer the question, I would say you're more morally culpable if it's painful for you to not feed. But if you have a choice, you have a choice about how to do it better and worse.
These vampires, they walk in the street.
Yeah, oh my God.
Sucking people's blood.
You have to see it. And that's Christopher Walken doing Kierkegaard. And that's how he survives. It's all Kierkegaard, which is all about freedom. And you have to choose every moment. It's so freaking good. It's such a good movie. The Addiction.
I feel like I need to take a look at this. Okay. That's going to be good in the show notes. Yeah. I want to take an answer to this question in a slightly different direction. So I feel like there's maybe 3 tiers of it. One, let's talk about real life for a second. With what we know today about traumatic brain injury, there are people who do terrible things who we now have an understanding they are not who they once were. They are literally a changed person, and probably the person they were before their traumatic brain injury would also not like the things that have happened. We still hold them accountable. We still, we'll imprison this sort of thing. With that depressing note, I want to take it to the game world where you asked a question. I feel like there's almost 2 implied questions. One, if your characters are having an argument of philosophy, what is the argument for them to be culpable and not culpable? And then second, and I think which is another interesting, how will the society around you view this? Because your hero might be sitting there screaming, it's like, no, wait, they got bit against their will. They didn't want to become a vampire. The villagers are still going to burn the vampire if they can. And I think that's that third question is maybe the most interesting, is like, what is going to be the dynamic between how the party feels about the event, how the party feels about the actions, and what they're willing to do to defend their neighbor, their party member, most likely, if I understand the question correctly, which is to say they're probably going to try to save the party member, versus how the society around them is going to view this. And how far will they take that defense for the person in their most inner ring of their compassion circle versus everyone else?
What if there's a way to reverse that thing that changed their behavior? Person goes from good person, becomes a vampire, does evil as a vampire, and then either it has an opportunity to go back to being a good person or is made to go back to being a good person in some way. Are they still morally culpable for the things that they did while they were acting evilly against their good aligned will? Like at the time, it may have been, yes, I'm very willingly doing these evil things, but when they return to their former good aligned self, are they still morally culpable for those actions?
I think I would still use kind of the way that I talked about it a second ago. The party probably honestly is still going to defend that character, and the villagers are still going to want to burn the former vampire. Oh, I want to twist yours one more. What if you had some material gain, like you somehow got a kingdom because you were a vampire for a minute, you did something cool. Do you have to give up the gains that you got? Yeah, literally your ill-gotten gains. Do you have to give them up in order to return to being good?
I wouldn't say necessarily you have to give them up in order to return to being good. Or so I would say that if you are actually going to act in a good manner, you should give them up.
But I could do so much more good with them in my control.
Boy, that sounds real lawful shading towards tyrant there, right? So I would say that almost goes back to Whedon's version of a vampire. Like, yeah, you get your soul back. Now you should feel remorse, and remorse should drive you to do things like give back the kingdom to where it rightly came from, something like that. Yeah, I think that we're definitely on the yes, you are morally culpable.
And whether you are or aren't, you're probably going to be held accountable. All right, folks. Thanks a lot. We're going to do this live. I'm going to look to my podcast mates. I'm Randall James. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at JackAmateur and at amateurjack.com.
I'm Tyler Kamstra. You'll find me at RPGBOT.net, Facebook and Twitter at RPGBOT.net, and patreon.com/RPGBot.
I'm Random Powell. You will find me contemplating the very nature of the universe, because dang, what a talk we've just had. But in general, you're going to find me here on RPGBot contributing to the podcast and some articles.
In real life, you will find me, Terry Macmullan, at Eastern Washington University in the Department of English and Philosophy. And you can also find me on Facebook and on Twitter at PhilosophyDM.
All right. And we will put links in the show notes. So if you want to reach out or if you want to follow, you'll be able to find Terry in the show notes.
Thank you again for having me. It was a real treat. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. I have learned a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah, this was an amazing conversation. I have to say, selfishly, I'm really looking forward to the notes getting put together for this. I think it's going to be a fantastic document.
Please send me an email. I'm happy to give you lots of sources too.
I'm just like imagining suddenly 8 wiki links to various philosophers. Like, here we go.
There you go. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
And also Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
The addiction. Oh, and hey, my colleague Mimi
Yes.
Marinucci, she teaches classes on Buffy the Vampire's philosophy. So yeah,
That's awesome.
So now we have to add links to those classes, the syllabus.
There's a huge world of pop culture and philosophy out there. So lots of good books on that.
Okay. So if you're listening right now, take a look at the show notes. There's some great stuff there. All right. All hail the Leisure Illuminati.
Hail.
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 You'll find affiliate nailed it. You'll find affiliate links for source books and other materials linked in the show notes. Following these links helps us to make the show happen every week. You can find our podcast wherever podcasts are distributed, especially the fine ones. If you enjoy this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe, and please share with your friends. If your question should be the question of the week next week, please email podcast@rpgbot.net or message us on Twitter at RPGBOT.Net. Thanks, folks. Okay, here's the deal. When I made the xylophone joke, I think random, you went like...
He did it.
What I actually did was, which is the thanks, Mr. Skeletal.